Healthcare is too expensive. Employers are offsetting costs onto their employees. Who will make health benefits affordable for hard-working Americans and their families?
You will! This is the Empowering Plans Podcast, a show dedicated to helping you once again emphasize the benefits in your benefit plan. Now prepare to learn,
Plan,
save,
and protect with the Phia Group.
Welcome, everyone, to the Empowering Plans Podcast. My name is Corey Crigger. I'm happy to be here today. One of the fun things about 2023 is that I've had about 5 unique podcast co-hosts this year instead of just being stuck with Nick Bonds all the time. And today is no different. I have a new podcast co-host that is a regular on the podcast now, but the first time that I've worked with her, it's Kendall Jackson. Kendall, how are you today?
I'm doing good. I'm happy to be here as well. It's nice to have a new host.
Yeah, no one wants to get too comfortable. You got to mix things up. You got to get some fresh voices together. And who knows, you might catch lightning in a bottle and have a great new duo here. And I'm very excited to host this podcast with you, Kendall. When Kendall and I first met a couple weeks ago and we started talking about the podcast, we thought that what would be best would be to do a year in review and maybe a little looking forward to some things that we have our eye on our different sides of Phia. Kendall, of course, being in our consulting side over in PGC, me on the provider relations side. And we'll get to that in just a minute. But Kendall, can you talk about 2023 without talking about the queen of 2023, Miss Taylor Swift? Is it even a recap podcast if you don't at least talk about her a little bit?
I mean, she did dominate this past year. Got to give her credit.
Absolutely, she did. Now, Kendall, did you make it to Foxborough to see the Massachusetts leg of the Eras Tour?
Absolutely. I can't miss it when it comes by. I did get lucky enough to go Saturday night, which was the rain show, and it rained the entire time, but it was pretty epic. So no complaints from me.
See, and you know that this podcast title, Back to December, and all the podcast description puns are done by true Swifties. Because
absolutely.
I was also at the Eras Tour in Cincinnati, and my wife and I got very lucky on the Capital One pre-sale before she broke Ticketmaster, and we were able to go and enjoy ourselves there. So this is not fake Taylor Swift love. This is genuine Swiftie love and genuine admiration to Miss Taylor Swift and an ode to her through our podcast theme today. Now, listen, we could do a fanboy podcast. I would love to do it. If you want an interview with Phia, reach out to me and let me know. But I think our core audience here, Kendall, is probably here for something a little bit different. They're here to hear about self-funding, healthcare cost containment, what's going on in the industry. So maybe we should talk about that a little bit. And I think the way to do it, I think there's kind of 2 things that has happened this year. Some of them have been company specific, and then the others have been like industry and content specific. So if you'll humor me a little bit, I would like to talk about a couple of the exciting company changes that kind of took place in 2023 moving into 2024. And then being transparent with all of you out in podcast land, I am struggling a little bit with my voice thanks to one of my lovely children passing a little cold on to me. So then I'll throw it to Kendall for some of the heavy industry stuff that she's been seeing, some of the themes that she's been seeing. I think she's going to talk about some gag clauses and wants to touch on the Dobbs case here in a moment. But, Phia did a couple things in 2023 as a company and from a product development standpoint that I'm very excited about, partly because they touch provider relations and partly because I just think that they're great industry solutions. The first thing, and I think the biggest thing, in my opinion, was when we announced our Ignite product in the middle of the summer. And Ignite is going to be the engine that kind of powers the Phia Unwrapped out-of-network solution. We are very excited about that technology. We got a great team of clinicians. We got a great team of tech-savvy employees over in the provider relations department that's working on the, kind of the software side of that and how that whole pricing engine works. We have a great team that handles the intake of the repricing portion. And of course, if there's any balance bills that come as a result of those reprice claims, Phia has always been kind of the industry standard in balance bill resolution. But a really great product announcement over the summer in 2023 that's really setting up for 2024, where we're going to be able to provide a lot of solutions out of network for all types of plans and also provide some newer solutions to RBP plans as well. So I was very excited to be part of that. announcement kind of at the Phia Forum and watching that team grow. That's something that I'm very excited to keep an eye on in 2024. And then the other thing, and this really hits home with the balance bill team. For those of you who don't know, I kind of manage a lot of the balance bill case handlers, and that's a lot of my day-to-day is still resolving balance bills, picking up the phones and negotiating with providers. And for just a brief history lesson here, Phia was kind of one of the first companies in the space to provide balance bill support for RBP plans, and that was over a decade ago. And as the balance bill resolution service kind of grew and evolved, we had different add-on products that you could supplement the balance bill support for. And basically those products gave a escalated level of support. It gave us some more tactics and some more tools to use to help provide balance bill support. And without getting directly into what we did there, what it essentially did was it created an experience where some clients had a quote unquote basic level of balance bill support service, and other clients felt like they had an advanced balance bill support service. And in 2023, we met as a leadership team in provider relations and decided that that was not the experience that we wanted our clients to have, that we wanted our clients to have the very best experience no matter what. And we wanted to make sure that everyone had the universal balance bill experience. So what we did is we basically swallowed all those add-on products, all those tweaks, all those additional bells and whistles to the balance bill support product. Starting in 2024, those are no longer going to exist. And every client that signs up for balance bill services will now have the full suite of Phia support through its balance bill resolution product. So we think that that's a great movement. We think that it's something that the market was asking for and we heard, and that we wanted to make sure that everyone had the best level of support as possible. And then the other big thing, and that's what I'm going to stop, and I'm going to kick it over to Kendall so we can get into some content here for all the consulting nerds out there that are downloading the podcast wanting to get to the substance. But, the last thing that I want to say is that we're excited for the first time ever to, regardless of who your front end RBP vendor or repricer may be, Phia balance bill support is now open to anyone, regardless of what that front end may look like. So we are super excited about that. It's the first time ever since the development of our balance bill support that we have been a kind of universal partner. We're excited for that. If you have questions about that, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me on email or my phone number. All that information can be found on the Phia website. But we are very, very excited about the product offerings, about what Phia has done to respond to the marketplace, and provider relations is just excited about those two products. So with all that, let's kick it over to Kendall. Kendall, consulting has had a big year. It's been busy. There's been regulations from top to bottom. Tell me about a few of those things and what stood out in 2023 to you.
Yeah. Thanks, Corey. So we definitely field a lot of questions about a lot of different topics, and I kind of chose some that have definitely been on the top of everyone's mind lately. So to start, I just want to briefly talk about gender affirming care. And I guess I'll just cut to the chase here and sort of cut to the end and tell you that our recommendation is taking a conservative approach when it comes to a gender affirming care exclusion. We recommend not putting those in your plan documents, and I'll tell you a few reasons why. Having that exclusion in your plan document comes with significant compliance concerns, specifically one being Section 1557, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of several things, including race, color, national origin, age, disability, and also sex, which includes gender identity. Now, not all plans are subject to Section 1557, but for those that are, a gender affirming care exclusion would likely be deemed discriminatory. Now, this is based on the Department of Health and Human Services. They issued a notice back in March of 2022 that said that categorically refusing to provide treatment for an individual on the basis of gender identity is prohibited discrimination. Now, for plans that aren't subject to 1557, there still are other compliance concerns. Those fall under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, which also prohibits discrimination on the basis of gender identity. And you could also face scrutiny under the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So there's several sort of different facets that go into this, and definitely some opportunities for scrutiny from different areas if you have that exclusion in your plan document. Now, there's no federal law that requires that health plans cover gender affirming care, so you don't have to actually cover the care in your plan document, but it's important to understand the risks of excluding it. And so from our position, we find those risks are relatively high, and that's why we recommend not excluding gender affirming care in your plan documents. And I'm sure we've had a lot of questions about this over the past 6 months or so, and I anticipate that it's something we'll also get a lot of questions on in 2024. So I definitely wanted to bring this one up. Moving forward, another topic that is certainly relevant, very much so recently, is the Dobbs decision. Now, I'm kind of cheating a little bit because Dobbs was decided in 2022, so it didn't actually happen in 2023, but we did reach a year post-Dobbs back in June. And a lot has happened in the past year. It's been a pivotal year as new regulations have developed in different states, now that each state has the authority to decide how much or how little to restrict access to abortion. And we're actually seeing this play out right now. Recently, a case in Texas. It was in the Texas Supreme Court. A woman was denied the right to terminate her pregnancy, even though she was advised by her doctors that her pregnancy threatened her life and her future fertility. Now, Texas law bans abortions unless the doctor deems that the patient is experiencing life-threatening conditions that sort of are caused by the pregnancy that places that woman at a risk of death or poses a serious or substantial impairment on a major bodily function. Now, some have said that this law is very vague and sort of can be interpreted broadly, and that's the stance that her lawyers took. But ultimately, the Supreme Court didn't rule in her favor, so she ended up seeking an abortion in another state. This is the first time we've seen a state abortion case post-Dobbs, and it's definitely not going to be the last. We'll probably see a few more of these cases moving forward as state regulations are constantly changing.
A little bit wider than just the Dobbs decision, right? We're also seeing a lot about abortifacients, right? What have you guys seen about that, about covering the quote unquote abortion pill or Plan B or similar types of medications there? Anything that you guys have answered or seen a lot of with those types of questions?
Yeah, and there's always risks with covering those because state laws can be a little bit complex when it comes to that, especially in Texas, where the Texas Attorney General was saying that they would go after providers in other states that were trying to assist Texas residents in obtaining abortion. So there's a lot of layers in this with how these state laws are going to be applied, and specifically in Texas, where some say it is vague. There's a lot of risks on what the plan covers and what the providers can offer to patients. It's definitely layered and very complicated, and plans just need to be careful on what they're covering depending on what their state allows. It gets a little hairy when you consider ERISA preemption of whether or not state laws would apply to an ERISA plan, because with the ERISA preemption, as state laws relate to coverage, sometimes those laws are preempted for state laws. So it really is sort of a layered and sort of complex analysis. So we definitely encourage clients to reach out to us if you have any state-specific questions, because it really can vary depending on what the law says and what type of plan you have. And we're also constantly monitoring this. So we monitor state changes and we maintain internal resources to stay up to date on all of the changing laws in every state, because it's certainly to continue changing as we keep moving forward into 2024. The last thing I wanted to touch on was the Gag Clause Attestation. This was a huge topic and something that is quickly approaching, as the first attestation is due on December 31st. It's just a little under 2 weeks from now. It's been a big discussion this year. Just to like a little bit of backstory, just very brief, we remember that the Gag Clause Attestation prohibits plans from entering into certain agreements that restrict the plan from disclosing provider-specific cost or quality of care information, or from electronically accessing de-identified claims or encounter information. Now, it's important to know which contracts to look at when it comes to the attestation. So it includes agreements, whether it's with your TPA, PBM, providers, a provider network. Basically, any contract that connects you to a provider network will need to be reviewed for gag clauses. And it's important to remember the roles of each party as we approach this attestation deadline. It is possible that the plan can contract and with a written agreement with its TPA or PBM to attest and submit on behalf of the plan. The extent of the TPA or PBM's involvement is up to their own discretion. They don't have any obligation to do so. It's sort of up to them on how involved they'd like to be. The legal requirement under the Consolidation Appropriations Act rests with the plan. So even if the plan contracts with a TPA to attest and submit on their behalf, if that's not done timely, it's the legal requirement under the Act remains on the plan. There might be some contractual liability with the TPA. They fail to adhere to what they said they do in the contract, which is a test and submit, but at least under the CAA, it rests with the plan.
One could even say it's time for the plan to speak now.
I see what you did there.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, so we're quickly approaching this attestation deadline. We want to make sure that all of your contracts have been reviewed. So this requirement kind of backdates back to December of 2020. So we have to examine all the relevant contracts from December of 2020 through now, through December 31st, through this first attestation period. And we want to make sure that none of those relevant contracts contain impermissible gag clauses. And then moving forward into 24, it's going to be just as important a requirement to make sure that we adhere to. It's going to apply annually moving forward. So plans should be sure that all of their contracts are compliant. And we've been handling a lot of contracts recently being sent to us, and we've been reviewing them for impermissible gag clauses. It's something we're happy to do for you guys under ICE and PGC referral. So we encourage you guys to reach out to us if you have any contracts that you're not sure whether or not they should be assessed for gag clauses, whether or not they apply to this attestation requirement, or if you're just not sure whether or not something is counted as a gag clause. So we're happy to review those for you. And even though we're not even to the first attestation yet, as we move into 2024, time just flies by. So I'm sure the next attestation requirement, when we get there on December 31st of 2024, I'm sure that'll be here before we know it.
Absolutely. The year being gone is absolutely mind-boggling. It really flies by, and you having to get all of our house in order right here before the end of the year. It's a great reminder there, Kendall.
Yeah.
I would be remiss if I didn't spend just a minute talking about the thing that has really dominated provider relations from a topic standpoint this year, and that's the No Surprises Act. For all those out there listening, if you want a full in-depth review on the No Surprises Act, Brian O'Hara did a great podcast in this feed a few weeks ago called the PSA on the NSA that really got into the nitty-gritty. But really, the No Surprises Act has dominated provider relations from IDR support, from answering questions coming in, the series of TMA cases, the Texas Medical Association cases, where IDR submissions were halted for a couple months, then they were back on, and then TMA challenges again based under a different standing or a different stance, and the IDR determinations go on hold again. It's been start and stop the whole way. And then you have just the volume of claims being submitted to independent dispute resolution entities. But I think one of the papers that came out in August said that there were 14 times more claims being submitted through the IDR portal ran by CMS than originally projected. So naturally, all the deadlines and all the turnaround times prescribed in the NSA are completely, I don't want to say arbitrary at this point, but it's very, very rare that you get a IDR response within a 30-day time frame, just because these IDR entities are stretched thin based on the volume. I think there's issues on both sides. I think that providers are too willing on some of these claims to shoot them as the initiating party into the IDR process instead of doing a review and making a determination of whether or not an initial or qualified payment amount was satisfactory for services rendered, or whether or not it's health plan sides who are, instead of engaging in open negotiations as full participants, they like to stick to their guns of what they believe the QPA should be for that claim. And when you put both of those things together, it kind of slows the process down. But I will say, I do think that the process is getting better. It's getting smoother. Response times are coming down from in the summer when, we were going 60 days, 75 days without getting determinations back, when that was supposed to be a 30-day turnaround. But this process is not going away. Anyone out there listening to this, just let me tell you, you're not going to balance bill for emergency claims anymore. And this is the solution. And this is the recourse that providers are going to be engaging in. And this is the process that you're going to have to make sure that you have a solid solution in place with. And if you have any questions about that, again, please feel free to reach out to me or to reach out to Phia, and we'll be happy to help you with any of that. With all that said, I think we're about up against it here. Kendall, thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast. It was great hearing your point of view from the consulting side. Do you have any parting words, anything you'd like to say to the audience out there?
I don't think so. Thank you guys for listening. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. Happy holidays to everyone out there listening. We appreciate you taking time out of the day to get informed. We're excited about what Phia has to offer moving forward in 2024. And we hope to see you again on our next version of the podcast. Take care, everyone.